is the Africanist Podcast by Dr. Abdulmunim Ali. Today I'm hosting once again Mr. Koert Lindijer, the Dutch NRC Africa Correspondent and author. Today we will further talk about Sudan, the ongoing conflict, and the violations of international humanitarian law that's going on in Sudan. We will further talk about the regional and international efforts towards eradication of war. Mr. Koert, welcome to the Africanist once again.
Thanks again.
Thank you. This month, the war in Sudan is getting intensified between Sudan Armed Forces and the RSF. And it is the first time we see that there is some win for the SAF. Is it winning control of the country?
Well, definitely something major has happened, right? The taking of Wad Madani at the end of last year is a major victory. What do I say? It's the first victory of the government army led by General Burhan, and that definitely will give the government forces courage, confidence to continue, and we already see that happening in and around Greater Khartoum, where they are still on the offensive and where they manage always step by step to push back their enemy, the RSF. So yes, it's the first major victory, and it could mean a serious turn of events in the war. On the other hand, the other side has not been beaten seriously, right? They have overstretched their forces, that's clear. They are licking their wounds, but they will definitely fight back. And in Darfur, they are still very much on top of the government army.
And they are fighting in Al-Fashir. The fight is still going on in Al-Fashir. Some reports talked about this may lead to a split of the country. And, the RSF is controlling the western part of the country and the South controlling the eastern part of the country. Is that possible?
Both parties say they don't want that. They have been saying that for a long time. I must say, talking to Sudanese, reading, listening to people involved in this nasty war, yes, one hears more and more the possibility being mentioned of a split up of the country. Whether that will happen or not, I mean, let's be honest, the RSF does not have full support in the West, but there is definitely the feeling on the eastern part of the Nile, around the Nile in the north, this troublesome Darfuri, if it's the only way to get rid of them by splitting the country, so it may be. Of course, the analysis is wrong, but because the RSF is not similar to the Darfuris, but in the feelings which have been aroused in this horrible war, yes, there is already a split in the mind of people, as if the Darfuris are fighting against the others. So I don't see it immediately happening, but if there will be a stalemate again on the battlefield, it's very, very possible.
Yeah, and some say that what happened in South Sudan, the separation of the country, is different from right now what we are talking about, the war, the current war. The South Sudan geographically was different, culturally maybe a bit of different, but Darfur and the rest of Sudan, there have been a lot of societal type of mixture. And so some people say that it's not possible, the separation.
Historically, Darfur already for at least 150 years has been part of Sudan. It has been part of this current, this stream of people coming from the north, the Arab world settling in the south. So historically they are part of what we call Sudan. Southern Sudan was a completely isolated area, apart from the slave raids and the Mahdi forces which went there. It has been completely separate. It has been belonging more to Uganda and other Eastern African countries than it has been to the north. So rightly so, the history is completely different. But one sees now the possibility of Western Sudan separating. We already have a situation for years in the Nuba Mountains, which is kind of autonomous, which, if it can't be part of a democratic Sudan, may also want to become independent. So yes, the threat is there now that it will be crumbling, it will fall apart, and everybody goes his own way. South Sudan, in my view, in the last 10-15 years has shown that maybe it was the wrong decision to go separate, because it is doing exactly the same thing what's happening in the north. But sometimes people are so angry that seems to be the only solution at that particular moment, to separate, to go its own way.
Yes. These patterns of crimes that we see, in such wars, the humanitarian and human suffering is always the major thing. And we saw what happens in recent fight in the central Sudan, in Al Jazeera, for example, large scale of killing of people, targeting areas because they are from different regions. Kanabi, for example, what happened in Kanabi, it's horrible. Why such patterns of crimes keep going? We saw these patterns of crimes in Western Sudan. Right now we see in Central Sudan. Why do you think it's happening?
Because in the last year, 1.5 years, we have seen that the battlefield is fragmenting. It is not just two forces, RSF versus SAF. Both sides have called in militias, badly trained people, ideological militias, as far as it is on the SAF side, where the former NIF, the fundamentalists, have come back. There is no strong central command anymore. Even if Burhan, or for that matter, Hemeti, says we are not operating on this in this manner, and violation of human rights will be punished by whatever, but will be punished, even then these crimes will continue, because there are too many different fighting groups, and they do what they want to do. They took revenge against the Darfuris in Jazeera, they took revenge against Southern Sudanese, which massively turned back to Southern Sudan, and it is all a result of no central strong command. And if anybody ever thought that the SAF is slightly better than the RSF, and deep in our heart, I think a lot of people have been hoping that what happened in Jazeera after the taking of Wat Madani shows that there are as many criminal forces on the side of Burhan as there are on the other side. Not any of the two parties can promise you a democratic Sudan free of violation of human rights. They are both doing very nasty things.
So that means the leaders cannot control these recruited militias anymore. So then they can make violations, and this will trap them. This will lead them, the leaders, to be held accountable. For example, before Biden left the office in the United States and sanctioned two sides, the RSF described as genocidal, and SAF is described also as a war criminal type of description. Do you think that punishment can lead to solution of the problem or ending of these violations?
Well, you can also say, if you mention one of the two sides, you tag a name there and call it, you are a genocidaire, you are committing genocide, it will be difficult to negotiate with these people. So sanctions, yes, put fighters under pressure. At the same time, it becomes less attractive for them to go to the negotiation table and talk. And we all know this war doesn't have a military end, it has to come via negotiations, one way or another. It came very late in the day of Biden's administration. The Americans really haven't done anything positive on the Sudan dossier, handing it over now to his successor Trump. We will see if in the Trump way he will be able to force both sides to the negotiating table. I would say for the time being it's the external powers like the UAE on the side of Hemeti, like Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia on the side of the South. They will be a determining factor by pushing the guys to the table, because they pull the strings in the end, and they are able to say to both sides, and now stop with this crazy war.
But do you think that the Trump policy will change towards Sudan? Maybe this will bring an end of war in Sudan.
We're all shithole countries, you know. So in that sense, I'm not expecting very much of an American president who used these terms about African countries. He doesn't know very much about African countries.
Sure.
Probably the African's Undersecretary of State will be a certain man called Pam. He has African knowledge. He knows the in and outs also of the Sudanese problem. So if he is given, or other politicians, rulers in the State Department, the Foreign Affairs Department of the US, free hand, making it possible to put pressure on these external forces, then one should hope that the new American president will make a difference. For the time being, we are looking at middle powers like Turkey. As you know, Turkey is mediating, and I think we should put our hope on Turkey more than the US, because Africa does not play any role.
More mediations we saw, like Saudi Arabians, they tried, they failed. And the IGAD and this African Union tried, but they found kind of rejection from one of them.
But they didn't push. They didn't push. Not any of the countries banged their hands on the table and said, if you don't do this and this, we'll do this and this against you. I mean, Hemeti, gold. Yes, gold. He makes his money with gold. Saf does the same thing. But it's not that they're extremely forceful political leaders with a lot of economic might behind them. They are warlords that can be pushed to the negotiating table. I don't have any doubts about it.
One last question about the civilians should have a role, Sudanese civilians. We saw Tagadum, for example. They were here in Nairobi this week. So do you think that their movement and try to mobilize the civilians' efforts to eradicate the war in Sudan, do you think that Tagadum can do that? Or?
We all agree there was a coup d'etat against the civilians. The civilians should be put back in power. They should get their act together. And whether it takes long or not, eventually they will see that their only enemy is the guys with guns around their shoulder. So, as usual, traditionally the Sudanese political parties are divided, but I think circumstances will push them to unite, to form a much more cohesive front and take it up against, again, their real enemies, which are the guys with the guns.
Mr. Koert, thank you so very much for your valuable answers. You can find the content of this podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and the Africanist website. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.